The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly in the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. And let's connect you today with a state senator and a delegate, Senator Ryan McDougle. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you, Woody. Thank you for having me today. Look forward to talking to you.
And Delegate Chris Peace, it's good to see you again.
Always good to see you, Woody. Thanks.
What's happening in your district? Tell us a little bit about it. Has it changed much? Is the economy better, for example?
Well, we have a very hard-working, middle-class community in Hanover, and I also represent part of King William and all of New Kent counties. And folks are still, having a hard time with the economy that took a plunge now going on 7 years ago. We are seeing some improvement, but certainly we are hopeful that we can create a better atmosphere for jobs, for businesses locating to the community. That's really our role here. We don't need to direct it, but we need to set a threshold and a floor with certain expectations for how a business could come in and operate. Unfortunately, in New Kent, you and I were talking about earlier, we had Colonial Downs close, which is sort of a signature place in our community that a lot of infrastructure had been built around neighborhoods and communities, water and sewer, golf destinations, wine, hospitality, travel, and tourism type attractions, and so we're trying to work on ways to help solve that problem. But we're proud of what our local Board of Supervisors is doing with economic development, and they're working hard trying to recruit more businesses and create jobs locally.
So I take it horse racing is in trouble, is what you're saying?
We always are optimistic about the future.
What about your district, Senator?
Well, Woody, after redistricting a couple years ago, the redistricting in the Senate was done differently in the House. Senate Democrats redistricted the Senate districts, and I used to represent all of Hanover, and now I just represent 3/4 of Hanover, and it was divided into 3 separate Senate districts. But I still get contacts from all parts of the district, and I think that the assessment that the economy is moving along is probably accurate, but there are a lot of concerning things out there going forward, and some of that has to do with the direction of the federal government and certainty. But we're doing things in Virginia to try to make sure that everybody knows we're open for business, that businesses that are currently in existence have the best ability to grow and expand. And we're looking at some creative ways. One of the bills that I introduced working with the Virginia Chamber of Commerce is the Virginia Reinvestment Act. And what we're trying to do is lure businesses that have, for tax reasons, have placed a lot of their operations overseas and give them an incentive to move those overseas components back to Virginia. I think Virginia is the first state in the country to try this approach, and we're excited about the opportunity it'll bring to continue to grow our business and investment. But Hanoverians and Virginians are hardworking, and they continue to move forward even when things have been challenging.
What's been the impact of sequestration over the last few years to the economy in Virginia? We have about 44 military installations. We've got the Pentagon. We've got a lot of contractors. It may not have a direct impact in your district, but it certainly has had an impact statewide, and that's the need to diversify our economy.
Absolutely. I think last year was the perfect example. We took a little longer than maybe we should have on passing the original budget, but that was over a debate and a difference on Medicaid expansion. The senator and I and others on our side of the aisle fought against expansion. We prevailed, passed a budget on time, but had to have 2 rounds of cuts partly due to the forecasts and not meeting forecasts. And that relates to your question, that sequestration has had sort of a delayed impact on Virginia. Initially, maybe not as much, but now we're starting to see the real effects of sequestration and the monies that flow to contractors and consultants and others related to defense or intelligence industries, primarily in Northern Virginia, but also Hampton Roads, which are our two major economic engines here in the Commonwealth. So we are maybe over-reliant on those professional sectors. We do need to diversify the economy, but withholding has been down. Non-withholding was way off in terms of our tax collection and revenues generated from that as a result of sequestration and other impacts. But we need to do a better job of diversifying the economy, getting businesses here, creating jobs.
To what extent do we benefit from other states? For example, Maryland, that has a much higher tax on businesses. Or do businesses relocate here? You suggested that we can attract businesses from overseas as a result of higher costs, but are we getting businesses relocating from other states?
Certainly we are. We compete globally and we compete with other states. We do it not just based on cost of our tax rate, even though that is a key component that we strive in the Senate and the House of Delegates to maintain at a low level, but it's also regulation, workforce, opportunities for employers, families, and life. And so it's the entire package. And in Virginia, we work very aggressively to make sure we have great schools in our K through 12 levels, great colleges and universities, and we have, I would put ours up against any in the country as being tremendous. Have a workforce that has the skills in order to work for the employers and be able to do the types of jobs that they need. And then that business climate for the actual owners and operators of the business. Can they deal with the regulations that we have in the state, and what is the cost for them to do business? So it's all a package that we try to maintain going forward. But we've had some challenges. With the nationalized healthcare or Obamacare, it put in a tax on all Virginians on those items that we consider non-withholding, capital gain sales and things. That reduces the revenue Virginia gets from people when they make those sales, because you take off of your state tax, income tax payments, whatever you pay to the federal government. So that was a permanent reduction to revenue for Virginia, one of the challenges that we're struggling with. And certainly our district of Hanover and mine goes up to Fredericksburg and then the Middle Peninsula and Northern Neck. We have a lot of military impacts. Fort A.P. Hill, Dahlgren, which is a major employer of civilians, and then a number of people in our district drive north to work at the Pentagon or for defense contractors. But a lot of those jobs are high paying, they're technology, they're creative, they're skills, engineers and computer individuals, and we need to find opportunities for them. Also, why we've been working very closely with the technology sector and trying to bring new technology opportunities to Virginia, because those are good jobs for Virginians.
And Woody, I'd just add, there's a lot of talk about preferences and tax preferences. And there's a JLARC report that outlines where the government's essentially picking winners and losers, but trying to do it in a way that incentivizes business and job growth and economic development. So we'll see this session some work on tax reform as a part of that. But we should always take the position of first do no harm as legislators. The private sector's very good at understanding the climate, if there's that certainty that Senator referred to, and then adjusting and moving forward and expanding and growing that business. Unfortunately, Governor McAuliffe issued an executive order earlier this year, Executive Order 20, which has already had a tremendous negative impact to businesses and business owners from our district in Hanover. Ball Office Products. Melissa Ball is a woman who is a woman-owned business. And she has reported that some of her employees, as they're doing business with the state, based on definitions in this executive order, have already seen their pay or project to see their pay get cut in half. And so we need, as a state, to be responsible and not unduly burden or unnecessarily interfere in the private sector.
You mentioned tax preferences, and I believe there's a bill dealing with the land preservation tax preference that's been in existence for some time. I think someone wants to reduce the amount of that credit, and as you indicated, all of those tax preferences are still under study. They represent quite a bit of of revenue, however, and it's not easy to do that because whoever's going to be hurt is going to howl.
Well, and it's not just that. You know, when you start adjusting, what you'll hear is you're now creating a new tax on someone else to relieve the burden on another. And that is exactly the problem when you have government getting involved in the private sector. They're creating winners and losers. And so we just need to be smart and approach it in a strategic manner, have the input of the private sector, but have the bottom line be we want what's best for Virginia's economy so that jobs are created.
The holistic approach to attracting and maintaining private business entities in the state, as you point out, is very important. The schools, be they K through 12, our institutions of higher learning, and our community colleges play a huge role in that. Talk to us about the budget impact on those institutions.
Well, as we've gone through the last number of budget cycles, we have paid particular attention to our K through 12 schools. We've wanted to make sure that as we've had cuts, that K-12 has had fewer cuts than other areas, and tried to make sure that we've provided more resources at every step of the way possible for K through 12. As you look back historically, we had more revenue coming into Virginia for dispersal in the general fund back in 2007 and 8 than what we've had now. We're just reaching back to those levels with the budgets going forward. So it has been a challenge for us as we try to make decisions. So we have to do things differently and more creatively. Say, is teaching the same way, is providing the same resources in the exact same manner the most efficient way to get them to our kids in school? And we are continuing those processes now as we go forward. We're competing in a global market, and our kids need the skills to be able to compete in that global market as well. But the budget that will come out of the legislature will have more money in K through 12 than there was in 2012 and 13. So we continue to increase those numbers.
And we actually held harmless, Woody, K-12 in this last round of budget cuts, where about $2.6 billion back in September and November when we were in the special session last year. The governor is committed, I guess, in his budget to try to hold higher ed harmless. But you know, on the House side, we've got some bills that deal with the fees and the increasing fees on college students. I've long had a concern about the increasing cost of higher education, the debt burden that is placed on the backs of those who are going through college, and how that impacts their decision making after college, especially if they can't find a job in the field that they've trained for. You have people who delay buying a house or getting married or doing any of the things that actually help our economy function and flow. And so we need to be very mindful of how we address tuition. I've submitted in the past caps on tuition increases. Last year we had a bill that had the Department of Education look at a governor's school for career and technical. Mm-hmm. And I'm very proud of Jamel Wilson, who's our superintendent in Hanover, and our State Department that have been working together the past year to find ways that we can say there's no stigma in career and technical, that these are important jobs for our economy. And we want to take those best and brightest and encourage them and help them get out there so they be captains of industry and have an American dream.
Back to stimulating the economy, I think you have a bill that deals with long-term capital gains.
We do. There was put in place a number of years ago the ability to get to stimulate the economy by giving companies that were locating in Virginia, small businesses mainly, not the large multi-million-dollar corporations, a break on their taxes with long-term capital gains, and we're trying to extend that. We've been working with a number of different business groups across the state. So that, combined with our Reinvest in Virginia Act, are two of the major bills that I'm carrying. But as the delegate mentioned, there are a number of other bills that our colleagues are working forward, and there's really been a coordinated effort between the Republicans in the Senate and the Republicans in the House to focus on a package of bills that we think will give individuals and companies more opportunities to grow and expand and just to keep up with the challenging economic times.
You recounted a story earlier, I believe it may have occurred at a hearing recently regarding sex registries and the need to update that legislation.
It was very recently. Just this morning, we had an individual came to me and said that he had been abused was a horrific story, and it took him over 3 decades to report it to the police. And then the way the case was handled was not the best that could have possibly gone. But one of the challenges that we found was there was no place that a citizen could go except for the individual courthouse and find out if somebody had been convicted of a violent sex offense prior to 1994. So we worked with the state police all summer and came up with a bill that would allow the state police to put on their webpage those individuals who were in one place, individuals who were convicted of those offenses that you'd have to register for today prior to 1994. It was really I'd love to take credit for it, but it was really a citizen that saw a need and a problem, and we worked to find the solution. It was introduced in the House last year, but cost a lot of money. We found a way to do it cheaper and still get the results. So I'm proud that that moved out of the Senate Courts of Justice Committee this morning, and hopefully we'll be sending it to the House of Delegates before too long.
Now, there's some legislation that you're involved with regarding public-private partnerships. There was a significant problem with Route 460 over the past few years. A lot of money spent by the state that apparently has not gone to very good use. So there are going to have to be some changes there. What's likely to happen?
Yeah, sure. Privileged to serve as the chairman of the Transportation Subcommittee on our Appropriation Budget Committee in the House. Our Appropriations Chairman has been working with the administration on reforms to P3, the public-private procurement program that we have in the state that deals with things like 460, but statewide and major significant projects that are necessary for a better infrastructure to move goods and services in the economy, help the economic development of our Commonwealth, as we've already discussed. There are several elements to those bills. There are 2 bills that are part of that reform. In the end, we want to make sure that the taxpayers of Virginia get value for that $300+ million that has already been outlaid. We expect the environmental report to come back, which was a big part of how all of this went off track, if you will, and that should be out soon, certainly while we're in session, is my understanding from the Secretary, and there will be opportunities for improvements to Route 460 and possibly with the same contractor, but they're going to have to go to bid, they're going to have to go back out to the public. We want to make sure in anything we do with procurement that we're good stewards of the taxpayer and that it's a fair and transparent and accountable system. And so I think these bills, whether they're in this form or as they take different forms through the process, will help to ensure that and make sure these types of things don't happen again.
Daycare providers have been in the news as a result of some unfortunate incidents. There may be a need to look at further regulation or broadening the regulation of daycare?
Yeah, you know, it's been tragic, the number of stories statewide. When a parent, Senator and I are both parents, and we take our children to preschool or to daycares that are regulated and licensed, we don't worry that when we return in the evening that our child will be there safe, and that's an expectation every parent should have, and that's sort of the minimal threshold that we should have as a Commonwealth, that children in care should be safe. Should they have quality programs, I think is also important as they age, and we try to help them be ready for kindergarten, so they're reading on grade level by grade 3. This has future, there's data that shows that in the future, if they're not doing those things, then we may bear further costs as a Commonwealth, whether it's through juvenile justice or corrections or unemployment, other entitlement programs that people find themselves on. So it starts early. It's very important that kids stay safe. There's a handful of bills that are in, both from the administration, from the Republicans, that will look to try to ensure the safety of children. It may not always be further regulation, because my concern is that you'll drive that unregulated operation that's pretty much a cash basis, that's a need of that parent. They have to find some place so they can go to work. That'll drive it further underground. We won't know where these children are. And so I think we need to be very careful as we go forward crafting these responses to these tragedies, that we don't have those unintended consequences, that we provide notice to the state, or if someone holds themselves out as having a license, it's not just a business license, it's $15 at your local government. It actually means something. So we care about these families, and we want to make sure that every parent, working parent, has a well and safe and well-educated child in the afternoon when they come pick them up.
Sticking to transportation issues, there's a there's a new competitor in town, so to speak, Uber and Lyft. And obviously that has caused some controversy, and the state is looking at a way to reasonably regulate them. I know Chris is probably involved in that, but I'm sure you have some thoughts on that as well.
I'm actually chairing the subcommittee that would deal with the issue this afternoon. Took up a little more of my weekend than I would have liked. It's a complicated proposition as we try to craft a way to make sure that Virginians are protected and to make sure that the business has the opportunity to bring their concept to the Commonwealth and operate.
Let's make sure our viewers understand who they are.
Well, I'll give you a simple example. The major companies are called Uber and Lyft. The technology that they have is an app on your phone. So a person has an app, they punch in that they're somewhere and they want to go to somewhere else, and then these app companies, Uber and Lyft and others, contact a driver, which is just a regular person with their regular car, and they go and pick them up and take them. We've regulated taxi cabs, limousine drivers, any drivers for hire, and regulating this group because they're not doing it 24 hours a day, every day, is a little more challenging. Some of the concerns that I have, making sure Virginians are protected, what if that driver is going to pick you up and has an accident? Is somebody going to have insurance to cover your vehicle? Or if you take a ride in that car and somebody hits you, are you going to be protected if you have medical bills? So those are the type of challenges we're looking at. One of the other big discussion points that we've had are if you've been convicted of some violent felonies, can you be one of those drivers? We do not want Virginians unwittingly have somebody that shows up at their house that had been convicted of a violent felony and they get in the car to drive away. So we're working through those. I spent hours and hours over the weekend and last week trying to narrow down the list of issues, but I guarantee you if you show up at the Capitol this afternoon, it'll be a lively discussion from each side.
Now, are they operating on some temporary authority now?
The temporary authority expires here shortly. I think the DMV is anticipating issuing a new temporary authority to make it through the end of June, because even if we come up with a solution later today, it could not go in place before the July 1st deadline of when bills have to be would become law. So it'll probably be a temporary authority for another 90 days once we get past session. But it is a complicated issue, and there are a lot of people looking at it, and it's taken a lot of time on both the House and the Senate.
Chris, in terms of other areas of competition, let's change our focus to healthcare, because certificates of need can be a significant impediment to somebody doing business in the Commonwealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who says that healthcare is a free market didn't tell you the truth. It's certainly not, and certainly not after the federal health reform or Obamacare was passed. And so we believe in competition. And so there's a bill that will look to deregulate, if you want to use that term, large hospital settings and major procedures within those settings. And there are other medical provisions and providers that might come thereafter. And so there'll be a robust debate between the hospital associations and those that would prefer to have a bit more competition in the marketplace. We've tried to take steps to identify what true cost is when you go and you want a procedure. What does it really cost? The whole notion of insurance has changed that. So you have people who pay out of pocket, private pay. They're bearing a lot of the cost of those who don't otherwise have it. Certainly we've had that discussion within the context of Medicaid expansion. Healthcare has a vigorous and lively debate in any number of areas, and this session won't be any different.
The other issue that is still being debated relates to ethics reform. There seems to have been a groundswell of opinion surrounding the conviction of our former governor that certain things should not go on. And there appears to be a move to come up with some different rules that would apply to both you in the House and you in the Senate. Talk to us about what the likelihood of some legislation passing again this session and what it might look like.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we have more legislation related to ethics, conflicts of interest. What I will say, and I think you'll hear a theme in our responses to any number of these questions, is the unintended consequences. I believe in honor. The Senator believes in honor. we've had an honor system, and it has worked for the most part, with the exception of a few glaring bad examples and bad actors. And so I hope that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, and make us and put a further stigma or black eye on Virginia. It's time to turn that around. We need to rebuild the trust for sure. And I think that starts with us. You know, we need to be good actors. We need to be transparent, honest, and fair dealing in everything that we do. And I hope that if the laws that we pass will reflect the same. We've seen Washington. They tried to have campaign finance reform and other ethics reform, and it's no better there. It is actually worse. It's a mess. And we don't want to turn Richmond into Washington for sure. At the same time, we also need to address the issues specifically that have come up to ensure that there is that trust from the public.
Do you think there's a need for an ethics commission to provide guidance to members of the General Assembly?
I think the situation is more basic than that. In Virginia, we're different from our federal brethren in that we're part-time, which creates some very positive things. We have to deal with all the legislation and regulation that passes because we have to be in the community with businesses and life being part-time legislators. But it also creates more challenges because we have to, by nature, have additional jobs. The salaries of the legislature are not ones that you could live on full-time at $18,000 in the Senate and $17,600 in the House of Delegates. But we need to have consistent rules. One of the frustrations that I had last year when we did pass an initial shot at ethics reform is the items that applied to the governor were the ones, or the executive branch, were the ones that the governor vetoed. So we really need to make sure that the rules that the House and delegates and the Senate are currently living under, that the executive branch has to live under too. And we'll be making sure that that we do that going forward. So I think creating an entire system where everybody clearly knows the rules and that those rules are in place for the executive branch and the legislative branch are really the basis to restoring confidence to the public in the system. And it really is about confidence for the public, because citizens need to have confidence that the individuals making laws are also living by them.
So appearance is very important, as are definitions. The definition of a close personal friend, the definition of intangibles, for example, are also
Absolutely.
important.
I mean, I think we all live by the maxim of, avoid the very appearance of impropriety. I mean, it's biblical principles, and that's sort of where you start. And you need to serve for the right reasons, and that's something that I know I do. I know the Senator, every year we think about, why is it that we're here, and who are we here for? And do it for the right reasons, and not to, improve our standing personally.
Well, great. Good to have you here again, Senator Ryan McDougle, Delegate Chris Peace. Keep up the good work. Good luck in this session this year, and we'll see you again.
Thank you,
Thank
Woody.
you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.